Today, I'm going to show you how to export your images perfectly for the web, for your clients, and more in Lightroom Classic. Hey there, and welcome to Phlearn. My name is Aaron Nace. You can find me on Phlearn.com, where we make learning fun. And in today's episode, as the final episode in our Intro to Lightroom Classic series, which I hope you've been enjoying up until now, we're going to show you all about the export settings in Lightroom. I'm going to show you my favorite settings for saving and uploading to the web, as well as how to create client proofs with watermarks to protect your copyrights. We're also going to show you our folder structure and how we stay organized through the entire process, bringing together our entire series from beginning to end. So here we are back in Lightroom. As you can see, we have all of our sample images from our vacation. If you haven't already done so, you can download these on Phlearn.com. Just follow the link right down below. So in our last episode on presets, we actually showed you how to export multiple versions of your photos. For instance, we exported out black and white versions of our images as well as color versions. So if you haven't checked out that and you're interested in applying presets, I highly recommend watching our last episode. We'll link to that right up here. And of course, you can watch the entire playlist on Phlearn.com, which we'll link to right down below. So we're back in Lightroom and it's time to export out our photos. Now, in this example, because we've gone through and organized our images and chosen our favorites, we're going to be exporting out our favorite images. So let's go up here to our attribute tab. Now, if you don't see this library filter, simply go to view and go to show filter bar. I'm going to go ahead and click on my color rating red and my color rating yellow, because both of these color ratings were my favorite images that I chosen earlier in this series. Now, let's go ahead and export these out. I'm going to hit Control Command A to select all of them. Then we're going to go to File and down to Export. And you can also hit Shift Command E on a Mac. So here we have our export options. Now we're going to go through all of these export options and create a couple of presets to make exporting easier in the future. So up here at the top, we have our export location. This is where our images are actually going. Now we can choose where we'd like them, a specific folder. We can choose the folder later, which is my preferred preference. We can just slap them on the desktop if we want to. So let's go ahead and choose the folder later. Now you can add this to the catalog, which I do suggest doing because then it's going to show back up here in your catalog. If you don't check that box, that's okay. You can always synchronize your catalog. We'll show you how to do that as well. But I do prefer to add these to the catalog. And if you have any existing files, you can say ask what you want to do, which will give you the option to overwrite them or choose a new name. Now, here we can choose to rename our images, which I do actually prefer to do, especially if I'm going to export multiple different versions. Now, in this case, we're going to go ahead and export some full-size JPEGs out. So let's go ahead and click on Rename To, and then we have the option to do, well, quite a bit here. I can actually click on this Edit screen and add whatever I want to. For instance, if I just delete this, I'm going to hit the backspace key. So I could say file name, and then I could say, then the original name, and then you can just type in here. I could type in and then a space, and then I could do a date as well. And you can see it's basically giving me the options of what it's, or an example of what it would be. So in this case, it'd be Intro to Lightroom 10 plus the original file name, Intro to Lightroom 10, and 2020 would be the date, year, and then you could do, month, year, and day. So that's getting a little bit complex. So let's go ahead and hit backspace. I just want to show you the different options there. File name, and then we're just going to click on do a little hyphen, and I'm going to call this full size. Fantastic. So it's going to take the file name and then append full size onto it. So let's go ahead and hit done there. We have our custom settings, and of course you can choose other settings here as well, but I prefer just to go to the edit menu and choose my own settings. Fantastic. So now what we're going to have when I export these, I'm going to have the original file name, and it's going to go ahead and append full size on it. So that's fantastic. When I'm browsing around my images on my computer, I'm going to know where are my full size images, where are my resized images. If I have anything for client proofs, I'm going to know those as well. So next we'll have a couple options for video. We don't actually have any video in this case, so there's not really anything we're going to do there. Here in our file settings, we have the option of how we'd like to export these. So we can choose a JPEG, PSD, TIFF, PNGs, DNGs, a whole list of things. Now, if you do just want to export out your originals, you can choose DNGs or originals. Those will just export as raw images. But if you plan on uploading these images to the web or sending them to your clients or getting them printed, chances are you're going to want to choose JPEG. So most of the time you're going to want to choose JPEG. So let's go ahead and click on JPEG. Quality, we're just going to leave this at 100 right now. And our color space, I recommend using sRGB because that's going to upload well and display well on the internet. The internet uses sRGB as the preferred color space. So if you don't use sRGB here, there's a good chance your colors are going to be a little bit off. So again, my suggestion, choose sRGB. Next, we have our image sizing. Now, in this case, we're not going to resize our image at all because, again, this is our full size version. Okay, we have output sharpening, which you can sharpen for the screen, especially if you're doing resizing. We'll do that in just a second. Our metadata, we want to include all of our metadata. In our first episode in the series, we showed you how to add your copyright information to your photos. So you want to make sure when you're exporting to include that. That way, if someone views your file on the internet, your copyright information is embedded in that photo. Okay, down here on the bottom, we have an option for watermark, which we'll be going over in just a few minutes when we go over the client proofs. And then we have some post-processing, which you can say like, hey, open this in Photoshop after it's exported, which I rarely do. So these settings look great for exporting full-size images to my computer. Now, I've got all these settings here. It's a great idea to go ahead and create a preset. So the next time I want to just export my full-size images out, I just have to click on one button instead of choosing all of these options. So over here on the left-hand side, let's go ahead and hit Add, and this creates a preset. So let's go ahead and click on Preset. There we go. Intro to Lightroom. I'm just creating a new folder, and we're just going to call this full-size images. Perfect. So here we can see I have my presets, Intro to Lightroom. This is basically just a folder, and here I've created a new export preset for full-size images. Now, in just a second, we'll show you how easy it is to get back to these presets. It's actually like you don't even have to go through the export dialog. But for now, because we have all of our settings good to go, we're going to click on the export button. So I'm going to hit export, and instantly it's going to ask me, where do I want to put these images? So if you remember from earlier, we're staying super well organized with our folder structure on our computer, and our folder structure is linked in Lightroom as well. We created a capture folder, which is where you put all of your DNGs, your raw images that you actually photographed. We created an output folder, which is where we send our images, let's say to the clients or to the web. And we created a PSD folder where we keep all of our PSDs. So we're sending these, they're going to go to our computer. So we want these in our output folder, and we're going to create a subfolder there called full size images. So I'm going to navigate to my images here. As you can see, we're very well organized. We've got our images by date as well as name. And here in our output folder, we're going to create a new folder called full size images. There we go. And go ahead and hit create. And this is where we're going to send our images. So let's hit open there. Now, up at the very top, we see our export progress. It's exporting out 12 files at full size. There we go. And it's pulling them back into Lightroom as well. So here in our output folder in Lightroom, we have our full size images. There we go. So as they're exporting, it's actually pulling them back into Lightroom as well. And all of these are JPEGs. What's really nice is the folder structure in Lightroom mirrors the folder structure on your computer. So for instance, if I just go to this full size images, well, fantastic. I can see all of my images at full size. I can right click here and I can say show in Finder and check this out. Okay, we have all of our capture folders. So this is, all of our images that we photographed earlier, which I broke down into a couple different folders. Our output, which contains our black and white images, which we exported out in our last video, color images from our last video as well. And here we have our full size images. And look at this, our file name is appended with full size. So it's now incredibly easy to see that these are our full size photos. All right, so that's our first preset. Now let's jump back into Lightroom and show you a fast way to get back to this. So back in Lightroom, let's say I just want to go back to my capture folder. Okay, I'm going to hit Control or Command A to select all. Then I'm going to right click here. We're going to go down to export. And here I have my export presets, which we just created. So full size images, if I click there, it's just going to open up my Finder window to ask me basically where do I want to put my images. And if you hit open, it's going to go ahead and export them out and put them back in your catalog. So now let's go ahead and do the same thing with our images, except this time I don't want to export out these full size. I'm going to size them a little bit smaller. This would be great for uploading to Instagram or maybe to your personal portfolio website. Basically, whenever you're uploading an image on the web, it doesn't make sense to upload like a giant image, right? You want something a little bit smaller. It's going to load faster. Your users are going to have a better experience. It's just a good idea in general. So what we're going to do is resize these images to 1200 pixels on the long edge. So back into Lightroom, we're in our capture folder, okay? We're gonna go to File, down to Export. There we are. Now, basically everything is going to be the same, except for our file naming. We're gonna go back, I'm gonna edit this again, okay? And instead of saying full size right there, I'm just gonna say 1200 px, so for 1200 pixels. And we'll hit done. Now in our image sizing, we're gonna go ahead and check that. You can choose your width and height, dimensions. I usually just choose the long edge, and this will take care of horizontal as well as vertical images. And here we're just gonna type in 1200 pixels. I use 1200, it's just a standard good go-to amount for uploading images to the web. All right, fantastic. So it's gonna go ahead and append my 1200 pixels to the name and resize them to 1200 pixels, and everything else looks fantastic. I'm gonna go ahead and sharpen these for my screen, excuse me, and my amount I want to be set to low as well, because we're scaling these down a little bit. I'm gonna assume I'm gonna upload these to the web, so I wanna apply a little bit of sharpening. So let's go ahead and add another preset. Click on Add. Okay, this is gonna go to my Intro to Lightroom folder, and we're just gonna call this 1200 px. There we go, fantastic, and hit Create. And now let's go ahead and export these out. We're gonna create another folder in our output folder. All right. Let's just call this Web Portfolio Instagram. Fantastic. So it's very clear exactly where these images are gonna go. And let's hit Create there and hit Open. And again, you can see right up here at the top left, it's exporting out 12 files. And if I scroll right over here, we can see they're automatically being pulled back into my Lightroom catalog. So the export is finished here. Let's go ahead and click on our folder. We can see, well, it's not finished yet, but it's almost there. Now, if I double click on any one of my images, you can see here, my dimensions are 891 by 1200. So the long edge, in this case, it's a vertical image. So it's gonna be 1200 pixels tall. In this case, this is going to be 1200 pixels wide. So now this image is 1200 pixels by 800 pixels. So we did all of our resizing, and my file name includes 1200 pixels, which I can right click here. We're gonna go back to Show in Finder, and I can see, yes, in fact, all of our images now are appended with 1200 pixels. So you can see it's getting very, very easy to get to exactly the files that we need to get to. So we've got one more great example for you, and this is gonna be for when you're working with clients. So when you get hired to do a photo shoot, oftentimes there's a little bit of a review process going back and forth before you send them your final images. So in the beginning, maybe you'll take a 50% deposit before you start the photo shoot. And then you've got a little bit of a review. Maybe you'll send your images that you think are the best images and then have them choose their favorites. Then you can go back and edit them and then send the finals. And then when you send your finals off, you can collect the rest of your deposit or the rest of your payment. In that process, there's oftentimes sending back and forth images from the photographer, which is you, to the client. Now, I've heard a lot of stories about clients just taking those images and publishing them and then never paying the photographer. I hope this never happens to you, but we want to make sure you are protected. So we're gonna add a large watermark to these photos to protect you. So this is not like the final images that you send your clients. They're not gonna get the giant watermarked versions. But during this back and forth review process, you need to protect yourself from basically having someone steal your photos. So that's when we add a giant watermark. Now, again, this is totally optional. You don't have to do that. If you trust your client, if it's like, if you took pictures of your family or your brother or whatever, like you don't have to do this. But if you're working with someone you've never worked with, it's just generally a good idea. And people don't think twice about a simple watermark on the photos. So let's go ahead and show you how to add a watermark and send these images off for client proofs. back in Lightroom, we're going to go ahead and hit Control-Command-A to select all, and then we're going to go to File and down to Export. Fantastic. So here we're going to go ahead and choose our rename settings. Okay, let's go to Edit here, and we're just going to call these Client Proofs. There we are. Let's hit Done. Now, resize to fit, generally I will resize these as well because we don't need to send full-size images during the review process. I wait until the job is done and then I send full-size images. So generally, I'll set these to be long edge at 1200 pixels. We don't need any type of sharpening. But here on the bottom, we want to make sure to include a watermark. So let's go ahead and click on this watermark. Now, there are a lot of different ways to do this. I prefer to just create my own watermark. So I'm going to go to Edit Watermarks. There we go. And here you just basically type in the watermark that you want to set up. So in this case, it's going to be @Phlearn. Now, let's just say you're uploading your images to the web and want a little bit of a watermark on your photos in general, then a tiny watermark totally makes sense. But during this client review process, I want this watermark huge, okay? I don't need it to be fully visible, but I want it to be large because I don't want anyone to be able to steal my images during this process. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and take our size. We're just gonna make this super large here, okay? I'm not gonna include a shadow. There we are. Let's go ahead and center this. So right here, you can center it across your photo. And then we're just going to take our opacity down. Okay. So basically you can see I've got my copyright in here, Phlearn. It's super clear that this is a copyright photo. No one is going to publish this to their Facebook or, try to use it in an ad campaign with a giant watermark in the center. So it's fantastic for protecting you. Now, if you have a logo, you can choose a PNG or JPEG and go ahead and put that in there as well if you want to. All right, so let's go ahead and hit save there. So that looks fantastic, right? I'll hit save and we'll give this a preset. So I'll say Phlearn, large, watermark, center, client proofs. There we go. So let's hit create there. And now we've got this already set up. So we're gonna go ahead and add a preset to the entire export. And we're just going to call this client proofs. Fantastic. And hit create. So we can just get back to this at any time. And let's go ahead and export. And again, these are just going to go in my output folder. We're going to create a new. There we go. A new folder in there called client proofs. Hit create and we're good to go. So let's click on open. And as you can see, it's exporting and pulling everything back into Lightroom. Let's go ahead and scroll over to our client proofs folder. And here we can see, fantastic, right? We have all of our images with a giant watermark here in the center. Again, during the back and forth process, your client can see, hey, these are great images. Like they're gonna be able to get an idea of what these images look like. You're being protected because you've got a giant watermark there front and center. And when it's time to go ahead and send them the final full-size images, well, you just navigate to your full-size images folder and send them these images. So let's go ahead and right-click here. We're just gonna go back to Show in Finder one more time, and let's take a look at everything that we've done with our organization. So all of our images here are organized by date, as well as given a name. We have our images that we've captured. In this case, it's JPEGs because we're using stock images, but if you're shooting raw images, this is where your raw images would go. We have all of our PSDs that we worked on, and our output images. I realize there's some setup going on here. Like this was a little bit more work than just hitting export and shove them on the desktop and worry about it later. But we are very well organized. It's very easy to find exactly what we need at any point in time. If your client comes back to you in a year and was like, hey, I lost the images or my hard drive died, look at this. It'd be incredibly simple to send them back to your client again because we're very well organized. So here we have all of our 1200 pixels with the file names appended. We have our black and white, our client proofs that say client proofs with the watermark on them. There we go. Then we've got our color images that we did in our last video with the Lightroom presets. And we have our full-size images that are appended with full size. And of course, everything is mirrored back in Lightroom, so we have instant access to all of our files. So as you can see, there are so many different options for exporting your images out in Lightroom, and setting up these different export presets is going to help you in different situations, whether you're putting your full-size images on your computer, uploading your images to the web at 1200 pixels, or protecting yourself when working with clients. Don't forget, we're giving away a free sample 10-pack of Lightroom presets on Phlearn.com. Just follow the link right down below. Thank you so much for watching this series, Intro to Lightroom Classic. I really hope you've enjoyed it. Have a wonderful day. I'll Phlearn you later. Bye, everyone.